What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be going over some of the best side hustles that I think are really viable, profitable options to pursue in 2022. And we're going to be doing this in kind of a ranking system. So what we'll be doing in this video is I'm going to be taking kind of the 5 most common categories of side hustles, and I'm going to be ranking these side hustles based off of 3 pieces of criteria. These 3 pieces of criteria include, number 1, how easy it is to get started with this side hustle. So is it easy to get started with? Like, could you start today if you wanted to? Or is there an upfront investment that you'll have to make in order to get the ball rolling? The second piece of criteria is how scalable is this business model? Is this something that you're able to really scale upwards into a multi-6-figure business? Or is this something that you really need to be actively working on in order to make any money? And then the final piece of criteria is how easy is it to make $100 per day with this side hustle? Would you be able to consistently make $100 per day by doing this side gig? And that's a question that we'll be answering in this video. We're going to be ranking all of these pieces of criteria from 1 to 10. Number 1 being the least desirable, most difficult option. For example, if something is very difficult to scale, that would be ranked as a number 1. Alternatively, number 10 is the best or the easiest. So if something is super easy to scale, you can do it really passively, that would be ranked as a number 10 side hustle. Then once we go through each of these pieces of criteria, we will tally up the totals for each individual side hustle category. And then at the end, you'll be able to see which side hustles are worth pursuing in 2022 and which ones should be avoided. So let's get started. Now, before we get started, I would like to say that I am having a Black Friday sale on all my courses. I will save you guys the spiel that I gave you on Monday, but I have 3 courses. All of them are marked significantly down for Black Friday. They will be on sale until Sunday, so if you want to check those out, I will have a link down in the description below, as well as in the pinned comment section as well. And while you guys are at it, if you guys could do me a huge favor, and if you could hit the like button and hit the notification bell for the YouTube algorithm, I would greatly appreciate it, as this helps my channel grow because it helps let YouTube know that you guys are enjoying my videos, and thus it pushes my videos out to a new audience. So if you guys could do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Now, the reality is we are getting close to the end of the year. And if you are anything like me, around this time of year, you start planning what you want to accomplish in 2022. So you may or may not currently be thinking about what type of side gig or side hustle you want to start in the new year. And if you're somebody who is trying to figure out how to make some extra money in the new year, then this video is the perfect video for you. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, we're going to be breaking down 5 different categories of side gigs. So rather than going after individual companies, for example, Turo versus Hire Car, we're going to instead be going after categories, for example, car sharing versus freelancing. So this should give you a good idea of what niche or what industry you should go for if you're somebody who's wanting to make some extra money. So with that being said, let's dig into the very first category I want to discuss in this video, which is, no shocker, car sharing. Car sharing is the gig of loaning out your car to your peers in order to make extra money. There are a few different platforms that facilitate this type of transaction. Turo is the most well-known one. It's also the one I talk about most frequently on this YouTube channel, but Hire Car, Get Around, Avail are a few different options as well. So to answer the first question of how easy is it to start your own car sharing business, I'm going to rank this a 4 out of 10, so kind of right in the middle. And the reason why I ranked it this is because car sharing is something that you can pretty easily get started with if you have an extra car, or if you work from home and you have the ability to not need to commute, or if you're somebody that could give up your car a couple of days a week. If any of these scenarios apply to you, then car sharing is pretty easy to get started with, but those are really big ifs, and there are ifs that a lot of people don't have the luxury of having. And to invest thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to list a car on a car sharing platform, that's a pretty big pill to swallow, and I would definitely categorize that as something that isn't easy to get started with. The second category is how scalable is car sharing, and I ranked that a 10 out of 10, so meaning it is super scalable. The reality is car sharing is a very scalable side business. This is something I talk about all the time on this channel, but you definitely have the ability to scale this business into a 6, potentially even 7-figure per year income stream. Granted, at some point it no longer becomes a side hustle, but it is something that can be scaled upwards. In fact, I know of many hosts that have done this really successfully. The next question is, how quickly can you start earning $100 per day? And I ranked this an 8 out of a 10. Now, the reason why I didn't rank this a 10 out of 10 is because of the fact that car sharing does have some hidden costs associated with it that absolutely does break into your profit margin. And so because of that, though on the surface it may seem really easy to make $100 per day, there are definitely different factors that need to be taken into account. Now that brings the total score for car sharing to 22 points. The next type of side gig that I want to talk about is drive sharing. So driving for platforms like Uber or Lyft. And the first piece of criteria is how easy is it to get started with this? And I ranked this an 8 out of 10. Now the reason why I ranked it a number 8 is because of the fact that similar to Turo or car sharing, it is pretty easy to get started with Uber and Lyft. You simply sign up and after a verification process, you're able to start working. But you do have to have a car, which is a pretty significant piece of criteria. There are a lot of people who simply can't afford a car. There are others that live in cities or live in areas where a car simply doesn't make sense. And if you fall into these two categories, you may not own a car and thus you automatically can't take part in these side gigs. So because of that, I ranked it 8 out of 10. If you have a car, then it probably is 10 out of 10. But again, that's a big if, and that's a big piece of criteria that you must be in order to get started with this side gig. When it comes to scalability, I think that drive sharing is really as unscalable as you can get. And because of that, I ranked it a 1 out of 10. With drive sharing, you're almost virtually just giving yourself another job. You can't make money with drive sharing unless you're actively driving, and thus you can't add any passivity to the business model. And then as far as making $100 per day, I think that drive sharing, similar to car sharing, I think that it's relatively easy to make $100 per day, but I think that there's a lot of different factors that need to be taken into account that oftentimes get left out entirely. For example, the wear and tear on your car, the different maintenance that you have to do on your car at an accelerated rate because of the fact you're driving your car so often, any type of damage that your car has, and of course your time as well. So because of that, I think that on the surface, it's very easy to make $100 per day, but once you start taking these different things into account, you realize it may be a bit harder than it seems. So I rank this as a 5 out of 10 being average. I think you can do it. It's relatively easy to do it, but not as easy as it seems on the surface. So that brings the total to drive sharing to 14 points. Next is delivery apps. So things like Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Favor, those types of things. Now, whenever it comes to getting started and how easy it is, I think that delivery apps are ranked as a 10 out of 10. And the reason why I think it's different than car sharing and drive sharing is because with delivery apps, you have the ability to deliver on things like a skateboard, a bike, a moped. You don't necessarily have to have a car. Yeah, you probably can't walk. I don't know if you can or not, if that's a thing that people do. I'm sure it is in big cities, but there are a lot of different ways you can get around the requirement of needing a vehicle, which makes this type of side gig way more accessible than a lot of other side gigs we talk about on this channel. But similar to drive sharing, I think the scalability with delivery apps is basically non-existent. And because of that, I've ranked this a number 1 out of 10. You basically are giving yourself a job, and unless you're actively delivering, you're not going to make any money. And when it comes to how quickly you can expect to make $100 per day, I ranked this a 6 out of 10. Now, interestingly enough, when I was doing research for this video, I found that the average drive sharing gig worker makes about $10 per hour. Those are people that drive for platforms like Uber or Lyft, while the average delivery gig worker, so platforms like Uber Eats, DoorDash, things like that, they make an average of $12 per hour. And so because of that, I ranked this a 6 out of 10 rather than a 5 out of 10, but I do think that there are some things that need to be taken into account with this side gig as well. For example, your time, wear and tear on your car or whatever vehicle you're using for transportation and things like that. I don't think it's as clear cut as simply making $100 per hour. I do think there are some hidden costs. That brings the grand total for delivery apps to 17 points. The next side gig that we'll talk about is renting out a spare room or a spare house that you own. I'm going to refer to it as just Airbnb for clarity's sake, but I am talking about really anywhere where you can rent out a space in a house or in a property. For example, Vrbo would be an alternative solution as well. So when it comes to the ease in which this side hustle could be set up, I'm ranking this a 1 out of 10. And there are a few different reasons for that. Number one is the fact that similar to car sharing, in order to get started with home sharing, you have to first have a home or an apartment or a room that you can share. And if you don't have that, then you're not able to join this type of side gig. Even once you do have that, there's a lot of upfront investment that you have to make as an Airbnb host in order to get started. When it comes to scalability though, with Airbnb, this is where this type of side gig shines. And I rank it a 10 out of 10. You have the ability to buy multiple properties, list all of those properties on Airbnb, and make a killing in the process. In fact, there are a lot of YouTubers, a lot of people that I look up to that have properties around the entire country that they list on Airbnb, and they make 6-7 figures doing it. So there is definitely a scalability aspect with this business model. You, of course, have to pay a lot to get your foot into the door, but once your foot is in the door, once you've developed those processes, your scalability is really limitless. And then when it comes to how quickly you can expect to to make $100 per day with this side hustle, I ranked it a 9 out of 10. Now, if you have the right type of property that has a lot of demand associated with it, I think that it's a 10 out of 10. I think that you can easily make $100 per day. But of course, there are those properties that aren't as much in demand. There are costs associated with this side hustle, and because of that, I can't rank it a 10 out of 10. There are definitely costs associated with this side hustle that would hinder your ability of pocketing $100 per day through Airbnb. That brings this side hustle to a grand total of 20 points. And then the last side hustle I want to talk about is freelancing. This could be doing freelance work on platforms like Upwork, Freelancer, Fiverr, or even just doing one-off projects on platforms like Facebook or Craigslist. There are a lot of different ways that you can go about freelancing, and the route in which you pursue is totally up to you. Now, when it comes to how easy it is to set up this type of side gig, I'm ranking this a 10 out of 10. This is one of the few side hustles out there that is not only incredibly lucrative, but has virtually no risk associated with it. All you need in order to get started is an internet connection. You can get started with a laptop, with a smartphone. You really don't need a lot in order to get started, and you can get started in the world of freelancing with no background experience whatsoever. And so because of that, I've ranked this 10 out of 10. Scalability, though, is where freelancing can come into question. Don't get me wrong, freelancing is scalable. In fact, I've talked to a lot of people that have done this really successfully. So you absolutely can scale, but is it easy to scale? And the answer to that is definitely not. And so because of that, I ranked the scalability of freelancing to be a 5 out of 10. And then lastly, how quickly can you make $100 per day through this side hustle? And I ranked that a 10 out of 10. And the reason is because unlike many of the side hustles we've talked about today, you don't have the same overhead costs associated with freelancing. Because you're working from your laptop and all you need is an internet connection, your overhead costs are really low, so you're able to make that $100 per day relatively quickly as long as you're willing to put in the work. In total, freelancing gets a rating of 25 points. So with these categories of side hustles, the max that these categories could earn in points is 30 points. So with this in mind, drive sharing made a total of 14 points, so 14 out of 30. Delivery apps had a total of 17 out of 30. Car sharing, a 22 out of 30. Freelancing, 25 out of 30. And Airbnb or house sharing, a 20 out of 30. So let's organize all these categories in order from best to worst, the best being freelancing and the worst being car sharing. Keeping in mind things like scalability, how easy it is to start, as well as how quickly you can make $100 per day. These are all things that will really help you in finding a side hustle that will not only be lucrative, but will also be worth your time. Side hustles are, in my opinion, one of the best ways to grow your wealth, but I think that they can very easily go from being a side hustle to being a second full-time job. And I think that you want to avoid that at all costs because you don't want to spread yourself too thin. You don't want to sacrifice your mental health to make an extra buck. And keeping these things in mind will definitely help you do that. Like always, you guys, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it. So make sure to leave a comment down below. For my American viewers, I wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you guys have a wonderful and safe holiday. And like always, I will see you guys in the next video.